Hi everyone, welcome to the Drastic Measures Ex-Muslim Stories and Ask Me Anything live stream. I'm here with Nick from the Gin and Tonic Show. Hi Nick.
Hello there, Drastic. How are you?
I'm very good. We're doing it's a bit of a mixed bag on the show tonight. I have no idea how many people are going to turn up. So we've got two main things, as I say. Firstly, just be opportunity for any ex-Muslims in the audience who want to come along. They can request a StreamYard link and come in and tell us their stories about, leaving Islam. The other thing is, I've nearly reached 1,000 subscribers, so we're up to 980 now. So this is sort of an early celebration of hitting 1,000 subs. So if anybody wants to join the live stream, anyone wants to ask me any questions for the chat, you can just leave comments in the chat and I'll try and ask them as best I can. They don't have to be about Islam. You want to pick my brain on anything else, I'm willing to do that tonight. I do have a video which I could review as a backup if things are quiet, and we'll just see how things go. So, and excuse me, sorry, I'm feeling. I don't know if I've got a little bit of a summer cold coming on, so excuse me if I'm coughing a little bit. So.
But yeah, no, that's just Allah punishing you.
Yeah, punish me, yeah, for my smoking maybe as well, probably. Hello to everyone, and someone said in the chat, hi Marco, hello from Kent, new here, not an ex-Muslim. Well, that's fine. You don't have to be an ex-Muslim. You can listen in. Hopefully, we will have some ex-Muslims. And if there's anything you want to ask, hi Abraham, nice to see you. Just while we're waiting for people to show up, Nick, did you you've got sort of a semi ex-Muslim background yourself, haven't you? You're I think part of your family's Muslim still, is that right?
Yeah, so just a bit of a background from my mom's side. We're from Hyderabad, which I don't know if many people know the actual history of it, but uh, basically the Nawabs, or the Golconda Empire, or the Bohmani Empire, they're also called, I believe, which is the previous dynasty of the Nawabs.
Right.
They were a part of the Sultanate that came in. So you might know Akbar, Aurangzeb, who had his war against Persia, I believe, or the north, and then he started looting India to be able to fund his war. So increasing the jizya amount, which was past what was recommended, killing and executing people. Um, so my family is from this Nawab area, which is an offset from this empire. So historically, I've been able to research and see the architecture and see all the discoveries that they were able to make there. But then also when I have to see the conflicting riots, when both sides are trying to practice their own religious peace, it
Right.
really did bring me a lot of issues growing up to a point where I was just like fuck it to both of them.
Okay, fair enough. So but you were more raised in the Hindu tradition, were you not? Or were you
Yeah,
kind of a mixture of both, or
so I had to learn about both, but basically my mother, she felt the same kind of attitude of she practiced it because she was doing it since she was a kid. So more of a schedule kind of thing rather than believing it was more so true. Whereas from my father's side, it was more so he didn't have that same kind of issues that my mom had growing up. So he was more of a follower of the Hindu faith. I personally read through the um, Hare Krishna movement in the Bhagavad Gita, and I actually found it aligned a lot more with my martial arts training I was receiving growing up. And that's why I was more interested in reading it and not mainly practicing it because there was a lot of activities within it that I wasn't actually doing, but more so it kind of intrigued me that you can actually you can actually maintain peace, but also they were direct about having conflict, but you're not supposed to have conflict in certain ways.
okay?
For example, I'll give you an example. The Prabhupada, the leader of the Hare Krishna movement, he was actually criticizing Gandhi, but he's saying Lord Krishna told you to fight. The whole reason the Bhagavad Gita exists is because Lord Krishna was telling Arjuna that he has to fight for the rightful duties of the kingdom. He's a king. He has to go to war and fight, or else if he takes his pants off and bend over for every single person, he's not going to have a kingdom anymore. Same thing with Gandhi. If Gandhi telling the Jews to just take it from Hitler and such is really wrong, you had to go and fight to stop the British and the colonial powers, is what the leader of the Hare Krishna movement was saying.
Yeah. Right, just to say to everyone listening, if there are any ex-Muslims in the chat who would like to join and contribute their own ex-Muslim stories, then please just ask me in the chat. If there are any other questions that people want to ask in the meantime, you can just put those in the chat as well. Yeah, so Nick, in your case then, because I mean, I don't know how accurate this be, but I always assumed that when you've got kind of mixed religious couples, it tends to more often be like a Muslim father and say a Hindu mother or a Christian mother and stuff because of the kind of instruction that Muslim women are not supposed to marry non-Muslim men. So I mean, is your situation fairly unusual to sort of have the mother from the Muslim side?
It
Or
is. It is, but I would have to attribute the fact that my parents were highly educated in India, where my dad and mom were both geologists doing their PhDs, and they were actually selected to do the Antarctica mission in the 90s on behalf of India. So
right?
they were kind of like, well, that's bullshit. Like, he's obviously educated enough to take care of me, and she's educated enough to have her own freedom and freedom of thought. So it's my both my parents didn't see any issue with each other.
Okay, so they were. So they would it be right in thinking that although they come from these religious traditions, they weren't like heavily religious. They weren't kind of really orthodox. Would that be a fair thing to
Yeah,
say? Or
yeah. Compared to the extended families, they were quite liberal.
did they ever get any sort of shit for it? That kind of mixed marriage. I mean, was there any kind of disapproval from the community in general, or did people not really care?
They kind of did get shit in the initial stages because you got to remember from the extended family there are still extremists there, but it's
Yeah.
more so of a trust saying they kind of saw how my parents were raising me and how my dad's side would see how my mom is raising me and my mom's side would see how my dad is raising me, and they're like, yeah, religion and such aside, they're both able to take care of the kids really well, and it's going to be wrong to take away the mother or the father of this child just because of a difference of beliefs, and that kind of realization slowly came, and I got to see that progression as I was growing up.
Okay. Um, right. Again, I mean, I can see we've got 10 people watching now. So, any ex-Muslims, please, just ask me for the link and I will put it in the chat. I don't want to do it until somebody actually asks. And yeah, if there are any questions, then please don't be shy. Put them in the chat, and I'll do my best to answer them. Or Nick will do his best to answer as well. He's a knowledgeable fellow. Yeah. So I mean, I suppose so. In your situation, then there wasn't any particular. It doesn't sound like you had much of a too much of a negative experience, like coming from that.
From my immediate family, not so much, in a sense where my dad kind of was like, he essentially had two rules. If I ended up in jail, he wasn't paying for my bail, and if I ended up in a hospital, he wasn't paying for the hospital bill. Those were his only two rules. But outside of that, he was pretty open about it. Whereas my mom kind of was like, "Oh my God, what are you doing?" And we get into a new argument almost every day.
Right.
And
Okay.
it was more so of whenever I used to play soccer quite regularly, trying to go pro. I used to box and do Brazilian jiu-jitsu quite regularly, and I was burning a lot of calories. So there would be a point where if I stayed vegetarian and I was eating all the lentils I had to eat to just maintain my active lifestyle, I'd be the FBI would be on my butt for the sounds I'd be making, especially as a brown guy, right? So I had to change my diet into a more proteinous diet, getting more meat and such, and that kind of gave both sides a mini heart attack. and such. And it was like the kind of lifestyle I was being raised here. Both I had kind of had to explain it to him. Both a diamond and graphite are both made out of carbon, but you can't put carbon in an environment that makes graphite and be shocked that you didn't get a carbon out of it. I grew up here in a graphite creating society, which has its own uses of pencils, writing, and such.
Yeah.
So I'm gonna turn out to be graphite. You can't expect me to be a diamond.
Right. Well, look, we've been going for 10 minutes now. So
Yeah,
if none of the audience are going to ask any questions yet, or there's no ex-Muslims who want to join, we can go to the backup plan of we've got this video which we can do a kind of gentle review of. It's Smile to Jana, and he's talking. Oh, hang on. Right. So
yeah, yeah.
Alioramus, Alioramus. I hope I'm pronouncing that right. You're saying that you'd want to talk, so okay, bear with me, and I will drop the StreamYard link. Let's have a look. So yeah, Alioramus, just click on the link there, and I'll let you in. Okay, so clearly people didn't want to have a. Someone's asking, have I come across Lloyd De Jong on YouTube, and if so, what's my opinion of him? Lloyd De Jong. I don't. Do you know who that is, Nick? I don't think I've heard of him.
I haven't heard of him either.
Is oh, hang on a second. Is he a Christian kind of preacher guy? Oh, hi, Perfect Darwa's in the chat. Hello, Perfect Darwa, welcome. Yeah, Marco, is he a Christian preacher guy? Is that who it is? That like the name vaguely rings a bell for me, but um, yeah, I don't know. You'd have to confirm whether he is the guy that I think. No, okay. Yeah, sorry, I don't know who Lloyd De Jong is. Yeah, Alioramus, I can't see you. You haven't showed up in the waiting room yet. So if you click on the StreamYard link that I left in the chat. Sorry, folks, might be having technical difficulties. Okay, let me. Has it shown up in the chat?
Yeah, it did. It's there in the chat. So you can't directly click from the YouTube comments, but what the person can do, Alioramus can do, is copy and paste it into
Yeah,
the link on top.
yeah. Tell me if you can't see the link, Alioramus, then just let me know in the chat. If you can see it, as Nick just said, if you can copy and paste it somewhere else and then click onto it, and that should let you in.
Yeah. And also, because this is an Ask Me Anything kind of style, I have one question I wanted to ask you as well, if you're okay.
Yeah,
Drastic.
go ahead.
So I was basically reading this article here, thinking of doing a future episode for Gin and Tonic on it. They basically define freedom of speech is the right to express one's ideas and opinions freely through speech, writing, and other forms of communication without any restraint. And then they mentioned the Holy Quran considers freedom of expression a fundamental human right from 1400 years ago because it appeals to sociology, describes every important social issue. What would your opinion on that kind of statement be?
Um, sorry, sorry, I was slightly distracted trying to. um, sorry, what was the statement?
Yeah, so let me share the screen again. I'll grab it. So if you want to like show it to the audience as well, I can highlight it.
Okay.
Basically, they define freedom of speech as a
Oh,
right
sorry.
to express.
One second, Nick. Ali Ramos, you have shown up in the. Oh, here we are. Hi, Ali Ramos. Can you hear us all right?
Yes, yeah, I can hear you, but can you hear me?
Yeah, you're coming through loud and clear. Welcome onto the stream. Sorry, Nick. We'll get back to that in a second, but I just want to welcome on Alioramus.
All right, yeah, for sure.
No
I'll jump
stress.
back on when
No.
it's
You can
appropriate, yeah.
you can stay around. It's fine. I'm just going to just to welcome Alioramus. So you're of ex-Muslim background, that's right?
Yes, that is true.
Okay. Did you?
I think what would be appropriate is if I introduce myself a little bit.
Sure. Please do. Please do.
Okay. You can call me Alioramus.
Alioramus.
I'm an ex-Muslim from Sweden,
Okay.
and I'm of Somali descent. Maybe
Right.
you're familiar with Somalis.
Yeah. I mean, I'm from the UK, and we've got a reasonable size Somali community living here. So, yep.
Yeah, and as you may know, they're all Sunni Muslims, or at least like 99%. And that was the way I grew up. My parents fled the civil war in Somalia in the 1990s, and they wound up in Sweden. And we went through a type of religious revival, if you can understand what I mean.
Yeah.
Yeah, because when you come from a war-torn country, people tend to rely more on their religion.
For sure. Yeah, I can understand that.
And my parents, especially my mother, tried to teach me the religion from a very young age. And me, I'm a sucker for biology and stuff like that. The theory of evolution and Darwin. And me, I always found the idea of God to be, how do I say, not very convincing. It was difficult to manage those doubts, if you could call it that. I tried to push them out of my head, to tell myself God is real, God is there, you just have to believe it. But
so did you always have these doubts? Like, are you talking from like a very young age, when you were still a child?
I was about age 12 when I really started to doubt if God exists or not. And over the years, me personally, I didn't like the thought of not there being a God, because my parents have taught me since very young that God is great, and the Prophet Muhammad is great, and he's the greatest person to follow his example. Yeah. And I started to make my own research. I'm sorry, did I interrupt you?
No, carry on.
Yeah, I started to make my own research, checking out Quran translations, the Hadith, and personally, what I found was that he was not really a good guy. If yeah, I think you know what I mean.
Yeah, I've got a fair idea, having read up on Muhammad for a long time. Yeah, he did some things which were questionable, to say the least.
So when I told my people about it, they told me to just see him as a man of his time, but at the same time, the greatest of mankind. And to me, that was contradictory.
Yeah, I agree.
Just considering that, he had concubines, he married a child, killed his enemies and opposition. And apparently, what I felt was like that he got a Quran verse when he wanted something. You understand what I mean?
Yeah, they were very convenient, some of these revelations that he would get suddenly to benefit himself personally, yeah.
If I recall right, even his child bride, Aisha, told him that your Lord hastens to fulfill your desires and wishes. Yeah, and I was like, yeah, that seems very spot on.
Absolutely.
Very spot on.
So was that kind of one of the main things then, was the character of Muhammad that ended up driving you away from Islam, or was it?
Actually, yes, because the Quran has also some questionable things, but I found the life of Muhammad to be way more problematic, at least in my opinion. Yeah, and me, I found science and the evolution of species on this planet to be way more convincing than a religious book from the Bronze Age. You get my point.
Yeah, absolutely. I think for a lot of ex-Muslims that are drawn towards science, this is one of the kind of breaking points, I think, for a lot of ex-Muslims. So yeah, your story is quite common. At least to the ex-Muslims that I've spoken to over the years, it is one of the big. Well, in fact, that and also Muhammad's character are two of the biggest things I think that do drive Muslims away. How old would you say you were when you had definitely decided you're not Muslim?
It was actually not that long ago. So I was about maybe 23. I'm 24 now.
Oh wow! So you're a very new ex-Muslim.
Yeah, it took a lot of reflection on my part to really try to deconstruct these toxic ideas I've been fed since childhood, and that could actually take some time to get rid of.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I mean, the programming runs deep, doesn't it? When you've been told something, from the youngest age that you can remember is, you've been told this thing is true. It really is difficult to break out of that kind of programming. I'd say that's not. I mean, I think that's true regardless of whatever religious tradition you were brought up in. But I think it seems particularly difficult for, excuse me, for Muslims. I think. I mean, did you have a lot of pressure from your family? I mean, actually, let me ask. Did your family even know that you're an ex-Muslim?
No, they don't. And honestly, at least for now, I don't want to tell anyone. Honestly,
how do you think they'll react?
Very badly. Maybe my siblings would accept me as the way I am, but my parents, it feels like they're too deep in, and it would break my mom's heart, I believe. And honestly, I don't want to put them through that.
Yeah, I can understand that. They're still your parents, aren't they? You're still going to love them. You still want to maintain like a relationship with them. So I can completely understand that. What about the wider? Why? Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Nick.
Oh yeah, I was just going to ask a question off of that as well, if you don't mind. Basically, I seen in a similar situation between the LTT or the Tamil Tigers attacks in Sri Lanka when around the same time when the Sinhalese people came to Canada. You see a huge cultural passing on through the generations of the Sinhalese people, especially coming from a war-torn area. It's even stronger. So what would you say are some of the aspects of your Somali heritage and culture that were essential to be passed on to you, and what do you think that you would push forward to your next generation based off of this revelation that you've seen in becoming an ex-Muslim?
In my homeland, there isn't any free thought. There is this one line of thinking, and everybody has to follow along. And in my household, it was the same type of, I don't want to say force, because my parents tried to teach me because they thought it would be good for me, but not in the manner that occurs in Somalia. But at the same time, it's difficult for, I would say, most Somalis, that have left their religion to actually come forward with it. It's not as easy as somebody who's a Christian or a Jew to leave their religion regardless of their ethnic background, because Somalis consider Muslim and Somali to be inseparable. You're not a real Somali if you're not Muslim. You would lose your Somali identity, you would lose your clan, your parents, everything you hold dear. And what I would try to teach those in my circle is that everyone has the right to free thought, the right to learn about other explanations for the way our world is the way it is. And some responses are positive, and others are judging. They don't want any part of it, and they want to keep believing the religion. And at least that's the way I see it.
No, that's fair enough. Is there a large Somali community in Sweden? Are there many people there from your country?
Yeah, actually, about 70 to 80,000, I believe. And Sweden is a small country, only 10 million people.
Yeah, I was about to say that is a large percentage of the population. Has that been like recent in maybe like last 10, 20 years that they've come, or is it a longer established community?
Actually, most Somalis came to Sweden in the 1990s, after 1990, and after 2006, and both were because of the war situation in the country.
Right, okay. So yeah, so I mean it's interesting because like when you were talking about like your parents, how you think they might react. This seems to be another thing as well. Like for ex-Muslims that I've spoken to, it seems like they're worried that their mum is going to be heartbroken, and their father's going to be like really angry or disown them. That tends to be the pattern that I've heard, and I don't know if that's typical, like in like or whether that's a particular thing with Somalis or ex-Muslims in general, where the it's more kind of like a sadness from the mother, but kind of like an anger from the father, as if you're, I don't know, betraying the family or something. I don't know. I'd be curious actually to sort of hear from other ex-Muslims whether they kind of follow the same pattern with that.
One thing I would say, Drastic, is that it's like, let's say you're an avid photographer and your son doesn't want to become a photographer. You're going to feel some sort of stress. But in the case of religion, when a lot of people do emigrate to the West, their religion is probably the only thing that gives them peace. And when they find out that their kid hates every single aspect of that, one thing that brings them peace and they hold so tightly, it's going to bring out a lot of emotions for them, right?
Yes, I would say that
Yeah.
the most important thing for people to push forward religious tolerance is to educate. At least that's what I think. Educate them about the world, the sciences, and freedom of speech. Maybe you're familiar with the Quran burnings that have been going on in Sweden. These,
I've seen it.
yeah, and I've seen people riot in front of my eyes when they riot because somebody burned a Quran, and I'm like, you're just proving his point. You get what I'm saying? He's saying Muslim is violent. It's a violent book. What did you do? Burn a police car, injured police officers. What is the rest of the world going to think?
Well, I mean, this is the irony with that kind of thing, because I think if Muslims for a sustained period, just when something like that happens, they just say, right, we don't agree with it, but we're not going to go crazy because we're peaceful people. I think most people would stop doing it, because in a way, I mean, it depends who's doing it. I'm not sure if these Quran burning guys are just kind of generally xenophobic, or they're trying to make a particular point about Islam itself. I don't know, but I think for the most part they're doing it to get a reaction. So if you don't react, then it wouldn't happen. It's self-defeating to get mad and start burning the place down, because then you make them look like the civilized guy, and you make yourself look like the uncivilized people. As you say, you're sort of proving their point. So
You were spot on there. I can tell you that.
Well, and again, it's funny because I mean I've talked about this quite a lot with a lot of people about the whole Quran burning thing. I mean, I don't personally approve of burning books. I think to me it does recall, like the Nazis burning kind of Jewish literature in the 1930s, that kind of thing. So I don't think it's a great thing to be burning any kind of book, but I do believe in the freedom to do it. I mean, I'd like to discourage people, but at the end of the day, it is a book. It's a piece of property, and somebody has a right to burn it. Now, I would say if you are deliberately going up to mosques and doing it day after day, I think you can make an argument that maybe you're trying to intimidate people. But aside from that, I would say, it's not a great thing to do, but at the end of the day, people, you've got to grow up. I mean, it is people's freedom to do it. If it pisses you off, don't watch them. Okay, if you're doing it right outside somebody's mosque, then I can kind of understand that you're going to have a kind of bad reaction. But again, the bad reaction should not be starting a riot. I mean, that's just fucking crazy as far as I can see.
The thing is, they're actually destroying, the hard work that people has tried to make to integrate into Swedish society, because the whole area is being looked down upon, and what kids are being taught is that they have to defend the honor of the Prophet. That's a fundamental duty upon all Muslim men and boys, and that's what I've been told as well by people in my circle. You have to defend the honor of the Prophet, no matter what, no matter the opposition. And I'm thinking, Islam is a religion, and religions are ideologies. You are allowed to criticize ideologies, and in Sweden, it's not illegal to burn a Quran, it's not illegal to burn a Bible, and it's not illegal to burn a Torah. Therefore, my bad. Therefore, it doesn't have to be right, but you can do it.
Yeah, and that's the point. And the Muslim community would just look so much better if they just said, look, we don't agree with this, but we're not going to go crazy, we're not going to react. Then everyone would look at the people burning the book and say, hey, well, look, they're being peaceful about it, you're being an idiot for burning the book. So it would work in the favor of the Muslim community. But and again, I'm not saying obviously all Muslims react this way, but as you say, I mean, there's been riots and attacking the police and stuff like that. And I would say on top of that, one of the problems I think is you've got a lot of the Salafi, the real hardcore Muslims, who are taking advantage of this as well, in terms of they are, and a lot of these are people that come from my country, like Muhammad Hijab and Ali Dawa and all that. They're often they're flying over to Scandinavia, they're trying to stir up trouble, and that is also going to be bad for the Muslim community, because in my opinion, those people are just thugs. I think they are horrible people, and they're getting publicly associated with the Muslim community in Sweden and Norway and other places, and that's just going to be really bad for them as well. I just wanted to read a comment from the chat from Hawaii. Hi, Hawaii. Nice to see you here. And Hawaii has written, I love Alioramus' bravery and wisdom. I applaud the panel for the conversation. Well, yeah, I agree. I think it's really, I really thank you for coming on and sharing your story, because that is, yeah, it does take courage. And I know it's, you're in a really difficult position, especially as, your family and stuff doesn't know. So yeah, thank you.
I'll manage. I'll survive.
Yeah, it's, so are there any other ex-Muslims in the chat who want to join us, tell us their stories, or is it going to leave all the pressure on Alioramus to keep talking here?
I don't mind.
Yeah, well, I mean, I'm happy to carry on the conversation, because I was one of the things I was going to ask about Sweden is, do you think that the Muslims who live there are generally very religious, or do you think it's just a small number of them are very religious and they're the most vocal, but most Muslims are kind of not too bothered about what's been going on with the Quran burning? I mean, what's your thoughts on it?
I would say only a fraction of the Muslims in Sweden join these riots, but the most Muslims in Sweden are religious, but they wouldn't go out and stone a police car, but they are supportive of it. I would say not all, but a considerable amount.
Okay, so it's a small number are doing it, but you think there is quite a large amount of support, even though a lot of Muslims wouldn't go and do it themselves. You think there's a lot of people are kind of sympathetic to the kind of reaction that's been happening?
Yes, and I would say it's because of these areas that have a high concentration of Muslims in Sweden have had their own type of, I don't want to know if you could call it a subculture, but they had their own way of thinking. They have become a society inside of society, and that's what spurs it on. That these ideas from Syria or Saudi Arabia or Somalia or North Africa keeps on living in these areas, even though it's in Western Europe.
Yeah, I mean, we hear this quite a lot and as you say, I mean, this is true to an extent in places like France as well. And I mean, I don't want to say kind of ghettos. I mean, well, I mean, it might seem that way in other countries. I mean, in the UK, there are cities and parts of cities which are heavily, you know, they've got a large Muslim population, and I don't know. I think like we've seen examples like for there's a place, there was a teacher a couple of years ago in Yorkshire, which is up in the north of England, where he had shown the Quran in some religious studies lesson. And I think they were talking about blasphemy laws. Sorry, not Quran, an image of Muhammad. I'm not sure if it was the previous images that were like the Danish cartoons or something like that. I don't know. I can't remember exactly what it was, but essentially he showed some images which were considered blasphemous. And within a few days, there was like a mob of kind of Muslim men who were kind of outside the school and they were threatening and intimidating. He ended up having to not just flee the school, but flee the actual town he was in. And he's still not returned. And this was about 2 years ago now, I think. So I think where you get these high concentrations of Muslims and where there's less integration in the general society, I think these kinds of reactions tend to happen more. So I really don't know kind of how you deal with that other than I suppose on some level try to make better integration efforts. But then if people are so tied to their religion, I think it becomes really difficult to do that, because no matter how much you start trying to appease that kind of behavior, then it just encourages it. And we had another incident recently in England where a school child had dropped a Quran on the floor, and it got
I'm familiar with that case.
Sorry?
I said I'm familiar with that case.
You heard that one? So, yeah, and it got a bit scuffed up. And again, there were death threats against the child. They had to call in like all the so-called community leaders from the Muslim community and try to appease them and say, "Oh, we're so sorry," like begging for forgiveness almost, because some child dropped a Quran in the school. To me, that's fucked up. You can't. If you have that kind of reaction, then you almost kind of deserve what you get. I just think that what they should have done, they should have got the Muslim community leaders in and said, report the people who've been making death threats to this child because it's not acceptable. But instead, everyone was bowing and scraping. I was so embarrassed by it, to be honest. We're talking about a child here as well, and they're acting as if it's some huge insult to the Muslim community. I don't know what you do, but that's the wrong reaction, in my opinion.
I completely understand your feelings. When I heard of that case and researched it myself, I couldn't fathom that a mother had to go and apologize and beg for the safety of a son. Then the police could instead have just arrested the people making death threats, because that's a crime under UK law, as far as I know.
It is, yeah.
And personally, I don't think a community that gets that type of reaction should back down, because these groups that want to push forward, the dawah preaching, and that they can't take any insults. You have to show them that we are not afraid of you, because they live off that fear. That's what they do. They live off it. You have to show, I'm not afraid of you. I'm not gonna back down on my principles, because we live in the UK, or in my case, Sweden. This is a free country with free speech, free thought. You can't let these men, well, most of them are men anyways, but you can't let them walk all over you, if you could say it like that, because if you give them your pinky finger, they take your arm.
Yeah, well, yeah. I mean that is the case. I mean, I laugh, but it's bad. I mean, we've had all sorts of incidents like that. And when I think back to the previous one with the teacher, I might be wrong on this. I'll have to check the date, but I think it was during the middle of the COVID pandemic, which means that there were restrictions on gatherings, and yet a big mob outside a school, and the police don't want to break them up. And it's like, well, why are they they're able to flout the restrictions, while if this was somebody else, like having a party or something, the police would raid them and break it up, and there was lots of people getting fines for doing that kind of thing. So yeah, it does feel like, particularly the police they just don't want to get involved. They're afraid of being called racist or something like that. And we've seen that in other areas, like with grooming gangs and things like that. They wash their hands of the situation. It's like, well, what do you expect the country to be like in another 20 years if you're going to keep bowing down to this kind of pressure? I just think you're just storing up terrible trouble.
Let me build on it, because you said something that is very profound, and you're completely right. I agree with you. So my viewpoint is that if you back down from these guys, they're gonna go over and walk all over you and teach you their way of life. You have to give up your way of life. That's the way these things work, because there's no room for both for peaceful coexistence. Because in Sweden, they have been for so long afraid to be called racist, bigot, and that's what has allowed, for example, the gun violence in the Swedish cities to explode these last 7 years, I would say. Because if you can't talk about problems, how are you going to solve them?
Well, it's interesting you should bring that up, actually, because I was tempted to ask you about that, because I have read things about gang violence and gun violence, and Sweden used to be known as like one of the most peaceful places in the world, and yeah, as you say, the last few years it seems to have gone a bit crazy there. So is this largely coming from the Muslim communities that have moved there, or is it just a more general kind of gang problem thing?
Unfortunately, most of those in gangs, about, I would say, at least 95% or 90% are unfortunately people from Syria, Afghanistan, North Africa, even my own people. Somalis are also part of the gang violence there, and most of these guys are Muslim, but I wouldn't say the religion itself has that much of an effect, in driving the gang violence. It's in my opinion, it's more about them. It's more about them thinking that society has been unjust towards them, that this is their right.
Okay. So it's they feel like they've been victims of like prejudice, racism, or something, or they haven't been given like enough opportunities or something. Is that the kind of thing that they say?
I would say it's like that, but at the same time, from what I have observed with my own eyes, is that it's not about poverty. It's not about that society has been unjust towards them. It's more about, it's an active choice that people make, that they want, fast money, they want the fame, they want to be feared, and I would say that's pretty much it.
But it is strange, because I remember Harris Sultan, the ex-Muslim Pakistani guy. Well, I think he was brought up in Australia, but his family's in Pakistan. He did a video recently talking about how he was looking at the different kinds of migrant communities that are typically in Western countries. And in the video, he was kind of comparing those from Pakistani backgrounds and those from Indian background, and he was contrasting how different their communities tend to do. Like the Indian Hindu communities, like in places like Britain and America, tend to do really, really well. They're like top of the list in terms of earnings. They've got very low crime rates. There's none of these kind of problems that tend to be more associated with like Pakistani and Bangladeshi communities. And he was saying, well, you've got to say that religion has got to at least be part of it, because they're all coming from the Indian subcontinent. They're all coming from the same area. They're the same kind of, they're all South Asians. They're the same racial group. So if there was this terrible, if the prejudice was that bad in the country, that surely it would hold everyone back. So why are you not seeing that kind of thing within Indian Hindu communities? And I think he's got a point. I mean, it is hard to think, well, what is the one difference that's got the one major difference between those communities is the religion. So I don't know what you think about that, but
now that you mentioned that, I just thought of something, and I think you can actually draw a parallel between Sweden, what occurs in Sweden, and the religion, because as you know, in the Quran and the Hadith, there is a lot of we against them mentalities. I think you know what I mean. That there is non-Muslims and Muslims, and the non-Muslims cannot be friends with the Muslims. They can't take them as intimate friends. They can't be lesser than them in certain ways. And in certain areas in Sweden, in particular in Stockholm, there is that we and them mentality over there as well. And those areas also consider themselves to be the better part of Swedish society. Maybe because they're Muslims.
Well, I just wonder. I mean, whether there is just something in the way that people are brought up in some communities who've got a Muslim background, whether there is this thing which Harris Tonk was saying, like there's almost like an inbuilt kind of victim mentality. And it's not to say that there's no prejudice or there's no racism. I mean, there's racism everywhere to some degree, but it almost feels like there's this exaggerated sense of being a victim, which you can't really demonstrate, but you still believe it anyway. And it seems to happen.
Well, a lot. Oh, my bad. Sorry.
No, I was just going to say it appears on the surface to happen more in kind of Muslim communities than, say, people from other religious backgrounds. I mean, again, I don't know for sure. I haven't got any statistics I can point to, but it just seems to be that way. Like, you just don't see Hindus in the UK rioting, or
I get it.
It's very rare. I mean, there have been some kind of confrontations. There was something that happened last year in Leicester, but that was between kind of Hindus and Muslims. So,
when you say it like that, sorry for interrupting you.
okay.
In the UK, the picture I've gotten is that UK born Muslims tend to be more towards this Salafist movement.
Yeah.
And in Sweden, I would say it's both the yes and no, because it's the elders that are pushing towards religious studies towards the new generation, towards the kids, but also the kids get this mentality from their parents that the Swedish government hates Muslims, that they don't want to see Muslims succeed. And on top of that I think maybe you've heard of this, but maybe you're aware of this controversial theory that Swedish authorities kidnaps Muslim children.
Oh, I think I saw one of the Darba guys in the UK do a video about that. But yeah, I don't really know that much about it. Is this a real thing, or is it just something they've made up?
In Sweden, we have a system, Child Protective Services, that it's called LUV, and
right.
It's supposed to protect children that are at risk of harm in their homes. And usually when the LUV removes a child from their home, it's for a good reason. The child that was at risk or wasn't being treated well. But I can't say that every case they have handled well. But that they kidnap Muslim children, that is way blown out of proportion, at least in my
and there's a culture Jinni who's in the chat. He's agreeing with you, saying it's basically a lie. It's just child services. He's also from Sweden. So
what did he say? Any here?
Yeah, he's agreeing with you. Basically, it's they're not kidnapping them, and that's just
honestly, in my viewpoint, the Swedish government and most of the Swedish people treat Muslims pretty well. Honestly, I think, and I can't say there isn't a bigot here and there. You know, bigots exist,
Sure,
but
yeah,
yeah,
you're gonna
but
get sort of racists and xenophobes everywhere to some degree. But yeah, I mean, I always got the impression that Sweden was a very kind of, excuse me, kind of tolerant place and pretty welcoming. So it's
yeah,
it's
yeah,
hard for me to sort of believe that there's just like hundreds of thousands of racists running around trying to persecute Muslims. I mean, it doesn't seem real to me.
no, it's at least in the recent year, it's because in 2022 we got a right wing government here in Sweden, and that has a lot to do with the gang violence because a lot of those in gangs are unfortunately immigrants, and people have had enough, and they think this is going to solve it. This new right wing government, and now Muslims get the picture that the Swedish government hates us, the Swedish people hates us, and I just try to tell people, oh, slow down a bit. That's not the way it is.
Yeah. Right. I was going to say, anyone in the chat, this was supposed to be just for ex-Muslims today, but I think I don't think there are any other ex-Muslims who are going to come on. So if there is anybody else who'd like to join the chat, I have put the StreamYard link in. If you want to come in and join the conversation, then feel free, and I'll let you join. Yeah. So you're saying, so I mean, the government that they elected then. So do you think that's a direct result of the kind of gang violence and stuff that's going on? And that was a reason that they got elected.
Yes, I think so. Because there have been pressure, on the government for years now to solve the issue with gang violence, but they have been ineffective and honestly, I think quite naive in the way they think. And the Swedish people, at least a good chunk of them now, think that the right wing ideas are the way of solving it with restricted immigration, with restrictions on certain religious groups, and to empower the police department and associated institutions. And honestly, I think it could be effective, but at the same time, you have to get to the crux of the matter. It's the way people think in certain areas, and that's you have to begin there with the ideology.
Yeah. I mean, I don't think that the kind of the Salafists really help the situation, and I'm including the ones from the UK that go over there and stir up trouble as well, like Mohammed Hijab. They go to Norway, they go to Sweden, and they give an even bigger kind of public voice to this idea that it's just the whole society is trying to oppress Muslims and this kind of thing. I'm just not sure how you kind of challenge that narrative if a lot of people already believe it. I don't really know how you're supposed to break it. I mean, because these people have they do have such an influence with a lot of young Muslims. Like I was thinking, for example, last year I did a video on Mohammed Hijab because he was invited to come and speak at an Irish university. I think it was in Dublin, the capital city in Ireland, and apparently he was the most requested guest from 5 separate universities that make up this one kind of Muslim student association. And I think these are not kind of like poverty-stricken Muslims. These are people going to university, so they're obviously intelligent, they're getting a good education, and yet the one person they wanted to actually come and talk at a university is Mohammed fucking Hijab. So you got to wonder. It's kind of like you can't blame that on poverty. You can't blame that on ignorance. These are students going to university. They're doing well, and yet this is the kind of person they're looking up to. And I just think, well, how do you combat that? And is it just inevitable when you've got this kind of harsh strain of Islam that so many of these kids seem to be following now? I just don't know how you deal with it.
Well, for starters, haven't you heard, if you have a PhD, you could still be an idiot? And the thing with Dawa champions like Muhammad Hijab, it's more about that they want to show themselves as these lions of Islam that goes out to defend the religion, that they are these intellectual people that others can learn a lot from, especially Muslim audiences. And I think that's what these young people are more drawn to.
Yeah, it could be. Just to say, welcome, Culture Jinni. Welcome back, Nick.
Yeah, I was
Welcome.
actually thinking on that topic. I had a point that I wanted to bring up as well. That's why I jumped back on.
Yeah, go
Please
ahead.
do.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I was gonna say I put a link in the chat for an article from New York Times regarding how the Sudanese refugees and such that had to come to Norway and such, they had to take a class on how to treat women. Was there
Oh,
something
that was
similar?
so embarrassing.
Yeah, it's like you're telling me you need a class to tell you not to touch a woman inappropriately. And
Yeah.
these two are like are educated refugees that are coming to a Western country. What sort of ideology do you think would just? It's obviously not just religion that's doing it, because many of the refugees are also Christians. That many of them are also of other faiths as well. What it just baffles my mind to what kind of mentality would just bring this kind of requirement.
Well, it is mind-boggling that you have to teach a grown man to not touch a woman in an inappropriate way. But I think it has a lot to do, with there is a shame culture in the religion of Islam. At least that's my view. That women have to cover themselves, so men won't, be turned on of seeing their body. And I would say that doesn't really help, considering that, in places like Egypt or in India or North Africa or even in my homeland, in Somalia, women with hijabs still get sexually assaulted. So I'm like, there is this religious rule that women have to wear hijab to protect themselves from the gaze of men. It's pretty ineffective.
Well, that's funny you should mention Egypt because I'm thinking back to the Arab Spring, which was what more than 10 years ago now. Actually, what was it? 2011, I think it was when you had the uprisings in Egypt and Tunisia. And I remember there was quite a lot of stories when there were crowds of people protesting on the streets of women getting kind of gang molested and there may have even been some rapes. I can't really remember, but there was a lot of sexual assaults going on in the street, and I don't know whether these women were considered to have been dressed immodestly or something like that, but there does seem to be clear issues there that it's almost like again, I'm not going to say the entire society or anything like that. I'm not going to, I'm not judging every single Egyptian or every single Tunisian, but yeah, it wasn't like a rare thing to see those kind of sexual assaults going on in those big crowds. And you have to wonder, again, how much is this down to the religion? How much is it down to maybe just general misogyny in the culture? I mean, I don't know. I mean, what do you guys think?
I would honestly say that the shame culture and the religion is intertwined. I would say the religion has the biggest effect because you're supposed to follow the Quran and the Hadith to the best of your ability. That's a duty upon you, upon Muslims, and not you. And I would say that makes it more difficult to shed these toxic beliefs, ideologies that the society as a whole has, force fed you since you were a child.
I mean, Culture Ginny, I mean, you put a comment in the chat now, which obviously you can expand on if you want, but you make a good point. It's a point I agree with. And when you said multiracial societies work, but not societies that have fundamentally different cultures whose most basic moral assumptions are at odds. And I think that's true. I mean, when people bring up race, I always think it's fundamentally that's a superficial thing to me. It's all
Yes.
about it's all about your culture. It's all about, I mean, people from different racial backgrounds can live very easily in harmony, and they do in many places in the world. But if, as you say, if you've got a culture that's vastly different, that's so odd, that can happen within the same racial group, and you're going to get far more problems when the culture clashes. I mean, obviously, you can see that in the Indian subcontinent. You can see that the clashes between Muslims and Hindus and Sikhs.
One thing that has angered me about the Swedish debate about immigration in the beginning was how our politicians used to, downplay all the cultural differences between various immigrant groups and Swedish culture, and just say, oh, is it just because you don't like kebab or you don't like this food? Instead of actually,
I remember that.
Yeah. And and it's so insulting because the issues of cultural, friction isn't due to most of those superficial things. Of course, you have certain things where superficial things do interact with more fundamental things like the hijab or the niqab in the more extreme cases. But, mostly those things are rather superficial. It's not that is the fundamental issue, but rather more things associated with values and fundamental ideas about society. I mean, it's also when people, say that more or less, oh, but we should be open to all cultures or religions. Like just a general statement straight up, like a principle. And then I say, yes, but you don't really realize what that actually includes, since you don't actually interact with these immigrant communities. You don't know the issues here. You have no idea about personally, I'm integrated more in the Arab community rather than the Somalis. And I can see that when people also, this shouldn't also be lessened. There is an enormous difference between various immigrant communities, also from the Islamic world. I do know that a lot of the Arab communities don't want to really associate with the Somali culture. It's nothing against you personally. I'm saying this. I'm just observing this from my viewpoint.
Yeah, culture, Jinni, to agree with you on that. Exploring a culture is, if I like Middle Eastern culture, I'll eat some hummus and baba ganoush, but I'm not going to sit there and defend their child pedophilia.
Well, yeah, I mean, you make a good point there. I mean, hey, Smiles in the chat. How you doing, mate? If you want to come on, mate, feel free. I put the link in the.
Yeah, when you said Smile for a second, I was like, Smile, the Jannah's here?
No, not Smile to Jannah. No. This is the good Smile. This is.
I mean, there are Alioramus. From where in Sweden are you?
I'm from Stockholm.
All right, from Stockholm. I live in Skåne.
I can hear your accent.
Oh.
You didn't think I knew?
Are we gonna get some rivalry going here now? Are we?
No.
May I say something?
Yes.
I think the problem with most Swedish people and the Swedish government is that Swedish people are very tolerant. I think they are very nice, very tolerant. The mistake they make is thinking that the rest of the world is as tolerant as they are.
I would agree with you, but I would also disagree, because I would say that Swedish tolerance is very 180, I would say. I mean, for example, the same people that spoke about tolerance and have spoken about tolerance for several years, oh, we shouldn't be intolerant towards immigrants. When this conflict with Russia started, they were the first to turn on a dime and begin to argue that we should incarcerate people up to 3 generations that are associated with Russia in concentration camps.
Yeah, you're right.
I'm just saying that what scares me very much about Swedish culture is that it's so consensus based. And if you step out of this consensus, you're getting frozen out. But it also means that when crazy ideas take hold in Sweden, like you see this also during the Reformation, in how extreme Sweden became in the religious wars of the 30 years wars, and how extremely brutal Swedish soldiers were there. and also in certain other political situations in Swedish history, where Swedes can turn 180 and become the most, collectively brutal things ever. In a way, I think our consensus culture is kind of dangerous in that way, and that is actually making me kind of fearful for what is coming.
Right, sorry, I just wanted to interrupt for a second. As I said before, this was supposed to be for ex-Muslims to join the stream, but if you guys don't mind, we did get a Muslim asking to join previously, so
sure.
If everyone's okay, I mean, if there are any Muslims who are listening, if you want to join in, you want to give your viewpoint or disagree with anything that's been said, then feel free. I have put the link several times for the StreamYard in the chat, so feel free to join us.
Yeah, I believe a gentleman by the name of Raya actually wanted to come on. I invited him to Gin Tonic as well. But yeah, Ryan.
Yeah, if you're still listening, then Ryan, please, feel free to jump in. I'll let you come in if you want to join the chat. As I say, I was trying to keep it just for excuse me, ex-Muslims tonight, but as I say, we've only got one with us, so yeah, I'm happy just to expand it out, and maybe we can get a more combative conversation going on. Yeah, there was a question in the chat actually from Russian spy sleazeball. Unrelated, but where did you guys find the information in the aftermath of Muhammad's death? I've heard on your video people were apostatizing after he died via poisoning. I'm not sure what video I don't know was that for me or was that for I don't know, Culture Jinni, you've got obviously you do plenty of YouTube videos yourself. I'm not sure if he was directing that question to you or not, but yeah, he's basically.
I haven't done any video about relating to this.
Okay. Yeah, well, as Mohsin has said, I mean, yeah, there's plenty of hadiths about about Muhammad's death, and I'm sure there'll be information in like the biographies as well and stuff like that. So, yeah, I was just going to quickly go back to I can't remember who said it, but about the different, you can get Muslims in different kind of communities and you get different results, and I certainly think that's true in the UK. For example, the Muslims from kind of Turkish and Kurdish backgrounds, in my experience, don't tend to be as religious as, say, those who come from a Pakistani background or a Bangladeshi background. This
is my experience too.
Yeah, and obviously this is personal, it is anecdotal, so I'm not saying that this is the case all across the board or anything like that, but it tends to be, I've spoken to many from the Turkish and Kurdish communities, and they on the whole, I mean, they almost never talk about religion as and they just tend to be, they don't get rolled up about the same kind of things that you tend to get from the South Asian Muslims who are living in the UK, over things like dropping the Quran or something like that. So it's obviously it's not just about religion. I think obviously the different cultural backgrounds are gonna play a role as well. But I'm not sure if that's true in Germany though, because I think in Germany there's a lot of people from Turkish background, Turkish families who migrated there, and I don't know if that's the same in Germany, whether they experience a lot, integration problems and stuff with their people from Turkish background. So again, I'm not sure if that's across the board, but yeah, I mean, are there many people with Turkish or Kurdish background in Sweden?
A decent amount, in my experience.
Yes, but those are also mostly older immigrants from worker immigrants from earlier.
Yeah, it's like in the 1960s, wasn't it? And the worker programs and. I mean, I always associate that with Germany, but you're saying that was in Sweden as well, then?
Yes.
Okay, that's interesting.
I've met a considerable amount of young Turkish people here in Sweden, and although they claim to be Muslims, but they're not very practicing, in my opinion. They have a more secularized view on the world and on society.
Yeah, that's exactly my experience. I mean, the number of kind of people from Turkish and Kurdish backgrounds who they drink alcohol, they eat pork. I mean, they're very they are about as far from practicing as you tend to get, whereas it tends to be a lot more piety within South Asian Muslim communities. So, but then I suppose that's partly because Turkey is that weird split, isn't it? I think it's. I remember one Turkish guy I was talking to years ago said that he thought about 45% of Turkey is quite secular, and the other 55% is very religious. So, if you happen to get people who come from the secular side of Turkish society, then they're not really going to give too much of a shit about religion, and they're not going to get wound up. I mean, even if they happen to be they've got that cultural background, they're not going to get pissed off over, a Quran burning and stuff like that. So,
I mean, they will probably still be pissed off, but it isn't,
Yeah, they're not going to go burn a police car or something.
No. But I mean, the thing with Balkan Muslims and the Muslims from Turkey because especially Western Turkey, is that they are actually. I mean, generally people there are a lot more conservative here than in Northern Europe, but they are conservative on the same level as the American South. It isn't that insane conservative that you have to fear for your life if you're another
drastic. And I'll also
for
give
example,
you a
if
small.
you're an atheist or something.
I'll give you a
sorry,
small.
Nick,
I'll give you a small fun fact. When I was studying my engineering degree, some of the funnest things and the people who got me kicked out of pool bars for running pool bar scams and such were all Turkish and Lebanese. They threw the biggest frat parties.
Mohsen Lala said something that I thought was interesting. You know what's surprising? Saudis are oddly not very Muslim. And I would actually I mean, it depends very much on persons, but I would actually agree here from my personal experience that there is, the state and also, the traditionalists are very on society, but it kind of drives people away. And it has also created kind of a counterculture. And also, ironically enough, do you know which area I think is one of the most, in a way, secular in a way among the people?
Which one?
Hijaz. Do you know why?
Go on.
Let's hear it.
Oh, of course, I heard this from a friend that, he's still a practicing Muslim, but, he isn't an extreme practicing Muslim.
Mm-hmm.
Rather, it is more like, every time there is Hajj, there will always, this area will be flooded by, Hajj pilgrims. And he had some horror stories about how they behave.
Yeah, I've heard similar things as well.
I just noticed a comment in the chat there from Hawaii, and she's saying that Turkish people in Canada, she knows quite a lot, and they're mostly irreligious there as well. So this does seem to be a theme.
And also, Drastic, check the private chat. I think someone named Spores is on.
I would also say that.
Oh, my
sorry.
bad. Sorry.
I would also say.
Right. Oh, I didn't realize there were people queuing up to get in. Okay, hang on a second. Sorry, carry on talking.
I'll jump off to make room for them, but yeah.
No, I think we've got room. Let me just trying to Spores. Yeah. Okay. Welcome, Spores.
Welcome.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Yeah, guys, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you. Can you hear us?
All right, I'm a Muslim, so I thought I'd give my perspective on all this.
Oh, right. Okay. Oh, well, okay. Welcome. Nice to have you here. So, was any particular point that you wanted to raise or that we've been talking about?
One of the things I wanted to...
Yep, go ahead. If you're talking, we can't hear you.
I'm getting an echo.
Okay, you still hearing an echo now?
Hold on 1 second.
You might have to adjust your mic. Or put a headset on or something.
No, I'm good.
Can you hear us now? Is it okay?
Yeah, you know what? I'm going to jump off and then try and jump back on again.
Okay, no problem.
All right, cool.
Yeah, sorry, what were we saying? I've completely lost my train of thought. What were we talking about? Well, it's nice to. Well, hopefully he'll come back. So it'd be nice to get a Muslim opinion on this. I'm not sure where Nick's gone. Nick, you didn't need to jump out, mate. I mean, I've got room to. I think you can have up to 10 people. So if you want to come back in, anybody else who wants to come in, you can. I'll put the link in one more time to the chat. There was another comment actually, which I will go back to, which Mohsin wrote. He said something about culture. Hang on a second. Yeah, he says, aren't culture and religion kind of like ice cream and sweetness? So I suppose, Mohsin, you're kind of suggesting that there isn't really any kind of difference in terms of it doesn't really matter the cultural background, the religion is the most important thing, or there's no real difference. Is that what you're trying to get at? Or I don't know. What do you guys think about? I mean, I think I don't like it when I hear sort of I mean, you get this rhetoric quite a lot. I think from some Muslims who will say things like, "Oh, well, if there's something bad happening, it's nothing to do with the religion; it's just the culture." And I do think that is bullshit. Like to automatically try to say that the religion has like no negative effects, because I think it obviously does. But at the same time, like we're talking about, you can get Muslims from different cultures, and it does tend to make a difference. Like we're saying, I mean, the kind of fairly secular mindset of a lot of Turkish people.
Might I add something here?
Yeah, go ahead.
I mean, I was about to add on that regarding Turks. I mean, one thing I'm working on, currently writing a script for a future video about why Turkey could secularize like it did. And I will argue that it has to do with their tradition of the very special version of Maturidi Hanafi Islam that they developed, where they more or less gave legal authority to the state to actually dictate laws in a way that most traditionalist interpretations of Islam in the most non-Maturidi traditions do not give.
Yeah. Oh, sorry. I think Spores is back. 1 second. Hi, Spores. Can you hear us?
Yeah, I can hear you guys. Can you hear me?
Your volume is a little bit low. I don't know if you can turn it up a little bit.
Okay, hold on 1 second.
I mean, I can hear you. Can everyone else hear Spores?
I could hear him fine.
Very low. Very low.
For me, it was perfect. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, so Spores, welcome again. What do you want to say?
All right, guys. Yeah. All right. So,
Do you want to give a bit of background about yourself, where you're from?
okay.
Or...
Yeah, I was born in a Muslim family. I would say that my parents were fairly secular.
Right.
You know, they didn't put the religion on us or anything like that.
Okay.
So I was just sort of it was just left up to me to kind of learn the religion and so forth. But I'm not. I mean, even though the background is like they were Sunnis. So originally, my parents were from Pakistan, and they were Sunni Muslims. But
so is that how you would identify yourself now, as a Sunni Muslim?
No.
So how would do you just think that's kind of sectionalism?
I just believe in God. That's the main thing, and I would say I just follow like the Quran alone.
Oh, so would you say you're an actual Quranist then? You don't agree with any of the hadiths, or you don't take them as you know, things that you have to follow? Yeah, go ahead.
I wouldn't say I'm exactly a Quranist in the sense like, you know, I'm not there following every word of the Quran or anything like that kind of thing. Like I'm not making every move according to the Quran. But
Okay,
as someone who does kind of believe in the Quran, it's like we had to relearn it again because everything that was taught to the Muslim community was through like the hadiths and things like that. And they kind of, if they didn't understand something in the Quran, they would go to the hadith and say, okay, this means that. Do you see what I'm saying?
yeah. So, all right. Well, let me get your opinion then on one of the things that we were talking about earlier, which was the Quran burning, which has happened recently in Sweden. I mean, what's your take on it? I mean, I assume obviously it's not something you approve of, but I mean,
it really doesn't affect me, to be honest. You know, if people want to burn books, then
okay. Well, that's that's good to hear, and obviously, you know, it's quite refreshing to. I'm not saying that you know, there aren't other Muslims who also sort of believe that, but it's not often that I talk to a Muslim who has that kind of view on it. So, that's kind of refreshing, I suppose. But would you say? I mean, would you acknowledge you're probably more in the minority of Muslims who have that kind of reaction, or do you think that most Muslims?
I think it is growing. But, you know, we're pretty much shut down by the Salafists. You know, they consider us as much kafir as you are.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's funny because I think the people like the big Salafi guys we know, like Mohammed Hijab and Ali Dawa and Smal Tajana and Kenny Boma, Daniel Hakikaju, all these people, I think they would probably end up takfiring most of the Muslim community, simply because they are not as strict and as orthodox as they are. So as much as they go on saying, well, you know, Islam is the fastest growing religion of the world, if they were the ones to define it, then you'd like, I'd say probably about 80% of Muslims they wouldn't actually consider real Muslims.
The thing is,
go ahead.
Oh, my bad. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
Yeah, what I wanted to say is, like, you know, for us at this point, because we are a growing community, but we don't have a voice because we pretty much get shut down by these guys. And also, I mean, we're looking at reinterpreting the Quran because the way they've taken it, as I said, they've taken everything from the hadiths. So let's say, for example, alcohol. It's not haram. It's not haram in the Quran in the sense that this is haram, that is haram. But alcohol isn't. It's kind of an open debate on that. And also when it comes down to things like you know, cutting the hands of thieves, that's again, it's an open interpretation because it just says cut off. And then what we look at is there's an example in there. For example, I think it was one of the, I can't remember the names exactly, but they found his brother after a long time, and they kind of put a little plot to kind of keep him there, and they accused him of theft. And the Quran says, you know, they weren't following the king's law; they were following God's law, and the punishment for him was just he was supposed to work there. So we look at that as saying, okay, that's cut off resources. Like, you know, if so, we're kind of in that early stage of kind of rebuilding and rethinking everything that was taught by the kind of Sunni version, as you might say. But, you know, there's a lot of people, believe me, that we just don't like the way that these guys, these Dawa people that are out there, and you know, it puts everyone in a bad light. Do you see what I'm saying?
No, yeah, I do. And to be honest, I'm sorry, I'm just to welcome Syed in. I'll let you talk in a second, Syed. Yeah, I would really like to believe that is the case, that there are like huge numbers of Muslims who are like yourself, who are, and it may be the case. It certainly, I remember talking to, I had Perfect Dawa on a live stream, and he was trying to make the same kind of case that you are. And I think if most Muslims actually did believe the kind of Islam that you're talking about, there would be so many of the problems that there is around a religion would probably disappear. But I'm just not honestly persuaded on the numbers, like how many people are seeing it from your perspective. But it is good to hear that you've got, you know, to hear from a Muslim who has that different perspective.
Well,
So,
the thing is, I mean, as I said, there's these guys are extremely forceful in the way that they go about conducting themselves, and it makes everything difficult. And they really are, you know, they're far right. That's the way I look at them. They are people that have no tolerance in anything. It's their way or there is no other way. And I believe it can be extremely dangerous, not just for the Muslim community as a whole, because, you know, at some point there could be a breaking point. Do you see what I'm saying? And there's no more cohesion.
yeah. Syed, did you want to introduce yourself?
Hi, sir. I'm from India. Yeah, I listened to you before. I think I saw you in Perfect Dawa, I guess.
Yeah. I had him on a live stream. I think it was last month sometime. Yeah. We had a long conversation.
Yeah.
So I take it you are Muslim?
Yes, I'm Muslim, but I'm not a tradition Muslim. My view is very different from all the Muslim in the world.
Okay.
So,
it seems that my channel does attract some very unorthodox Muslims, which
I mean, it kind of lends its way there, considering that you are kind of critical to Islam, and it would only be the open-minded that would stick around.
I mean,
I
I am critical of Islam, but I would like to say most of the videos that I do, I am talking about these specific Dawa Muslims. They are targeting the likes of Muhammad Hijab and Hamza.
Well, the thing is, Drastic, I mean, the reason that people are attracted to videos like yourself, because we're all in the same boat. You know, we're pretty much sick of these guys as well. So it's not it's anything different.
I mean, at the end of the day, okay, I'm still kind of anti-theistic. I mean, I don't think that religion is good for society in general.
That's a personal thing. You know, religion should be a personal thing. It's
to
me, it's like you know, I've never kind of, as I said, I was sort of left to my own devices, and growing up, it was kind of, I always believed in God, but I just didn't believe in religion in that sense. But I still don't believe in religion. This is not a religion. I don't look at, when I read the Quran, I don't see any religion in it. It's just a way that benefits you as a personal person, if you know what I mean.
Well, yeah, I mean, from my point of view, as much as I think the world would be a better place without religion, I completely believe in the freedom of people to worship, you know, to believe in God and to worship how they want to, as long as they're not impacting upon other people's rights or demanding special rights for themselves. And at the end of the day, I can coexist with pretty much any religious person, as long as they're not trying to force it on me or trying to force it on society. So as much as, on a personal level, I'm always going to disagree. But to be honest, if most of the Muslims say were like you, Spores, or Syed, or Perfect Dawa, I doubt I would have this channel. I think my particular beef is with this hardline kind of Salafi interpretation.
And that's why
I would say though that the Salafis aren't the baseline. They aren't the baseline. I would still say that they are the fringe, but in the opposite direction.
Yeah, but there are still problems within the religious text, even if you are, say, a Quranist or you're more kind of unorthodox. As far as I'm concerned, there's still, well, number one, I don't think the claims are true, but that's more of just a philosophical point. But there are things like misogyny and severe homophobia, and there's you're allowed to own slaves in the Quran, and there's all sorts of problems that even if you stick to a softer version of Islam, there are still many ethical issues there. But if you're coming from the point,
I mean, for us, again, all that's sort of we look at that as misinterpretations. When it comes to specific things, like let's say, for example, homosexuality. There's no punishment for homosexuality. It's as simple as that. There's no buts or anything about it. All this stuff comes from the Hadith. When it comes to women covering up, there is no claim in the Quran that a woman should be dressed in a certain way. All it says that a woman should be modest. Now, the modesty could be something else here in the UK. It could be something else in Germany. It could be something else in Saudi Arabia. It could be something else in Africa. A woman knows, like, a girl out in the street on a Saturday night, she knows whether she's dressed modestly or she's dressed like a tramp. Do you see what I'm saying? So,
yeah, but I do, and I agree to the extent that a lot of the harshness and a lot of the punishments are contained in the Hadith. That is true, in my opinion. But the Quran still does allow you to own a slave. It still does do things like condemn homosexuality.
again,
So okay, it's maybe it's not saying that you should be killed for it, but it sets up that kind of hostility by having that in the text. And you can have sex with the slaves that you own. That is in the Quran.
It doesn't be about
as Mohsin says, you can beat your wife. That is in the Quran.
It's something that's according to the Quran, which is against God. But when it comes to other things, like even that thing where hit your wife, again, there's interpretations to that the people who are in the Quran alone, and they're looking at the text itself rather than going to the hadiths on, because it just says strike out. Now that could mean. The way we see it.
Sorry to interrupt. I mean, I have heard these fringe interpretations in the past, and you really do have to do quite a lot of mental gymnastics to make it work. I mean, I have heard this. Oh, it doesn't actually mean beat, but I just think it's not I'm not persuaded by these reinterpretations. I mean, I'm glad that you are, but I think that most Muslims are not persuaded by this kind of thing, and that's the problem.
Well, I mean, yeah, most Muslims are not, because they have their own thing. But, they're just, okay, if something is a little bit difficult to understand or something, they'll just go straight to the hadiths to understand it. But what I am saying is that we are still new in beginning to interpret the Quran, and the way that is looking at just the Quran in itself, rather than going outwards and looking at other things. Like, again, that sex slave thing, that's an interpretation. We don't look at it as a sex slave. So there's a whole, we have our own forums with this kind of debate on what the actual words mean and stuff like that, because you got to remember the Quran is not made in like an everyday Arabic, like the way they talk now. If you go to Saudi Arabia and you were speaking in like the Quranic tone of Arabic, they wouldn't even understand what you're saying.
That's not true. Yafamunani. They understand me when I actually speak, and they have actually said to me when I speak, because I speak standard Arabic, which is very, with very large influences from medieval classical Arabic. They usually speak. They usually mention that I speak like an imam when I speak, because I use so many archaic roots and words.
I'm not going to argue with that, because I don't even speak Arabic.
They understand me. They just think I speak funny sometimes.
It makes no. I'm not going to argue with that. If that's what the case, it probably is.
But Spores, I truly believe that people like yourself are. I do think you're honest in that. I don't deny that you believe in these reinterpretations, but the problem that I have is that the clearest reading of a lot of these problematic verses are the way that they do read as the negative way that most Muslims believe them to be. So things like hitting your wife, things like being able to own a slave and to have sex with that slave, other kind of pretty dark kind of parts of the Quran. why I have such a problem is because while yes, there's always going to be some number of people like yourself who are going to try and reinterpret because I think you're a good person and you want it to say something else. Having so many people follow this text means that I think most of the people are going to stick to that negative hardline reading of it because it's the plainest. When you have a verse that says you can strike your wife or strike your wife, yes, you could mess around with it and you can sort of try and bend it, but that is the plain reading of it, which I think is why most Muslims see it that way. It's not because they're they're failing to understand the text. I think it's the opposite. I think they're just reading the text as it sounds. So this is why I think there's always going to be a problem, and unless the interpretation that you follow becomes the mainstream, we're never going to get rid of these problems. And I'm really skeptical that your interpretation will ever be the mainstream.
It's never going to be the mainstream. The reason it's never going to be the mainstream is, as I said, these guys are the ones that shout the loudest, and people seem to be listening to them. Anyone who does come into their vicinity and start to talk about other stuff, they get shut down immediately. You've probably seen it yourself,
Yeah,
when
I
they've
have
had debates with maybe Quranists or any other kind of
sure.
Muslims.
Yeah, I know exactly what you're saying, but to me, the proof is in the numbers. And when I look at, say, reformist types or Quranists, you look like just for example, the number of subscribers on YouTube of somebody like Perfect Darwa or Javid Hashmi, the impactful scholar guy. You're talking about hundreds and sometimes thousands of people follow them. When you look at the hardcore Salafis, they've got hundreds of thousands or millions of people following them. So it's just the sheer numbers would suggest that it's not just about being shouted down, because you can open up your own YouTube channel tomorrow and start putting your version of Islam down. How convincing it is will show in the number of subscribers you get, and I don't think you're ever going to get that many compared to the big
some of the channels which, let's say, are Quran alone. Again, that's not exactly what I follow, but there are some channels out there, but they're never going to have that numbers. You're absolutely right. They're never going to have that numbers. There is a problem, and the problem is these guys that are just going out there and shouting in the middle of the streets every other day, like Hyde Park or something. But,
yeah, that is part of it. That is part of it for sure. But I would also say it's because I think most people just happen to agree with that reading. They find it a more convincing argument to read the text in that way than compared to the way that you're reading it, or somebody like Perfect Darwa. So I think the text is the problem. I do agree that yes, they shout a lot and they use dirty tricks and they're aggressive. But if the text read the way that you're interpreting it in that clearer way,
but that's just with every religion. If you look at the Old Testament, you're going to find tons of things there that are just not going to be very appealing. That's just your view as an atheist, and that's fine. Everyone should have their own views. Everyone should make their own choices. That's the way things are. So, but the whole kind of meat and veg of it all is that there is a problem with the Islamic Salafists or Sunnis or whatever you want to say, and I don't believe that is going to go away. It's not.
Yeah, but like I say, I mean, something like YouTube, for all its flaws, it is a bit of a level playing field. Anybody can start their own channel and they can put out their version of whatever religion they're talking about, and if people agree, they're going to be drawn to it.
Yeah.
So I think in that sense, it is the great leveler. And when you see the likes of Ali Darwa with 1 million subscribers, and you see Perfect Darwa with 500, that tells its own story. And you can't really put that at the feet of, oh well, they're shouting loudly down at Hyde Park, because at the end of the day, look, you could go down to Hyde Park. Well, assuming you live close enough, you could go down to Hyde Park and do the same thing and do the preaching. And you could get a bunch of your fellow kind of more reform-minded Muslims and get a big group and do the same thing. But like, you're not. I'm assuming you're not anyway. I mean, maybe you have been down there. I don't know, but
No, you're not. I mean, there are some good channels out there, like Sam Garens, for example. He's got a good channel, but
I've heard of it. Yeah.
and it's about 5,000 subscribers or something like that. But you're absolutely right. The majority of people are just going to follow these guys. I mean, I don't, we don't even know how many, like, let's say Ali Dawah, for example, has 1 million subscribers. I mean, the guy, excuse my French, but he's thick as shit. You just got to listen. You just got to listen
Yeah,
to him.
there's no argument for me there. No argument for me.
You just got to listen to him for 10 minutes and you know this guy is a complete idiot. But at the end of the day, we don't know how many people are subscribing from the West compared to other countries. I don't know. I mean,
yeah, that's true. But then, but Sam Gerrans, I mean, he could have subscribers from all over the world as well. I mean, that's the thing. YouTube, in that sense, is pretty democratic. Anyone can find your channel. Okay, yes. I mean, obviously, the algorithm is going to promote certain kinds of things, so that can work against you. But the point is, if you make your case, and people are convinced by your interpretation, then they're going to come around to your way of thinking and just the numbers. I mean, like Ali Dawah has got what? So he's got what's that? 2,000 times as many subscribers. Is that right? Have I got those numbers, or is it 200? Well, anyway, it's like 5,000 compared to 1 million.
Yeah, I mean, look, the thing is as well, it's it's not our way to kind of get people following or whatever, or try and get this mass out there. Our way is simple, that this is just for us. As I believe, like, if you believe in God, it's like someone being if someone's got blue eyes or brown eyes, you're just kind of born with that thing inside you that you're always searching, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, I know what you're saying, but then unfortunately that means that, and I get where you come from, because you almost say it's like, it's a personal thing for you, it's a personal choice, your religion, you're not telling anybody else what they should sort of think, and I respect that. But at the same time, what that does mean is that the only people who are going to challenge these Dawa guys are going to be atheists like me, who just get told, I'm a racist, I'm a bigot, I'm far right, even though I'm a left winger. I just want to hate on Muslims or something like that. It'll either be me, or you'll get the Christian evangelicals doing it, and they're accused of all the same things as well. So it does send a stronger message.
I mean, it is wrong, but it's important for people like yourself to speak out against him. I mean, that's the only reason I watch your videos, is because you're one of the people that is still on YouTube that is speaking out against these kind of people.
Well, yeah, as I said, I mean, I'm one of the very few atheists who are doing it. I mean, I do know a few people who are doing videos, but again, they're like me. They've either got, just a few subscribers more than me, or they've got less. I mean, it's really difficult to kind of build anything. And say the main people who are known for doing the critiques are, well, I mean, you've got a handful of ex-Muslims. Obviously, you've got Apostate Prophet and Harris Sultan and Abdullah Samir. So, I mean, they are out there, but like the numbers are so small compared to those that are pumping out the Salafi propaganda, that it's, and I just think it sends a stronger message coming from reform-minded Muslims to challenge them. So again, I'm not trying to put the pressure on you, mate. I know you're just one guy, and that's fine. And not everyone has got the time or the inclination to do this kind of thing, but I'll respect somebody like Javid Hashmi just from the point of view that he went on to modern day debates and he did challenge, what's his name, Daniel Hakikachu, in that recent debate. But
yeah,
like the numbers are just too small. And I think while these guys dominate, I think most Muslims or more Muslims are going to follow their version than your version. And that's bad for the whole world as far as I'm concerned.
It is. I agree with you.
Well, for Muslims as like yourself, as much as for any non-Muslim. So
yeah, I absolutely agree with you. I mean, they are a problem. They're a problem here in the West, actually, more than anywhere else. Because if these guys were going out there and trying to do this stuff in some of the Middle Eastern countries, it wouldn't work out well for them.
Yeah, I mean, look, this is why I do. I mean, because so many of these guys are based in the UK, I just got to the point where I was like, I felt I had a responsibility to do something. I mean, I'm making a very small dent at the moment, but I'm trying with it. But yeah, I mean, it disgusts me that so many of these guys are just pumping this out, and they're all living in my country, or our country. I mean, I say mine because none of them actually identify with living in the UK. They all kind of identify with, well, they all want to live in a caliphate somewhere. So
Yeah, well,
um,
mate, I mean, they don't want to live in a caliphate because that's why they stay here, because they know.
well, yeah, there is that hypocrisy as well. Yeah, they all give it the large like that, but then none of them ever leave, do they? They're all sitting comfortable in London.
But one thing I can guarantee you, you're not as disgusted as I am, because if someone asks me like, what do you follow, and I'll say, okay, I'm a Muslim, right? If I say that, I kind of get associated. Do you see what I'm saying? I get associated with the kind of nonsense, and then so it disgusts me more that these people out there. What I don't understand is, like, a lot of these guys are born in the West, and the way they're acting, it's just bizarre to me. I just don't understand it. It's not like they're under any kind of oppression, or people are vehemently against them or anything like that. It's just like they've come to this conclusion in a free society. That I don't understand. It's like, how do you get to that point?
Yeah, but I would say this is partly the reason is because their reading of Islam, they are reading the kind of most aggressive version of it, which basically says, don't take friends from the non-believers. It says, you should want to, Muslims basically should be the super citizens. They should have more rights than everyone else. Everyone else should be subjugated or killed. They do actually believe this stuff.
I know.
And so I partly the reason is because of the religious ideas that they hold. I would say, particularly for the likes of Ali Dawah, Muhammad Hijab, all these strong Salafi types, it's because of their religious beliefs that they believe this. And this is why, as much as I respect the fact that you are more reform minded and you would not want a lot of the horrible stuff that they're talking about, I can't let the religion off the hook. I mean, it is the source of a lot of the horrible shit that they believe.
Yeah, I mean, talking about that stuff, to me, it's like what we believe in, myself and people like that, is trying to compare apples to oranges. So, fire away, say whatever you want, mate. It's no, it doesn't affect me in any way.
Well, look, in my videos, I do try as often as I can to point out that I'm not talking about all Muslims. I'm not talking about even the majority of Muslims in many cases, depending on what issue I'm talking about. So I do try and make that clear as often as I can. But yeah, at the end of the day, I'm still always going to have a problem with the religion itself, because even with these softer interpretations, I mean, you can't interpret all the bad out of it without entirely rejecting the religion, as far as I'm concerned.
May I say something?
Yeah, sorry, we've been dominating conversation. Go ahead there. Go ahead.
No, but I enjoyed listening. I just want to say the dangerous thing with Salafists is literalism. That they take the text literally, and that they try to pass that on to their viewers. And like you guys said, they have such massive platforms. Guys like Daniel Hakikachu or Muhammad Hijab, and his audience, at least from what I've seen in the comments, doesn't seem to reflect on the sometimes kind of outrageous things they say in their videos, and they just see it as a win of some sort. The way, for example, Sabur, battles atheists on Speaker's Corner and confronting Darwinists, and I'm just like, these guys are not that educated on that matter, on those particular subjects, and yet they try to paint their version over it. And by the way, I subscribe, to the theory of evolution, and the different methods and complications of evolution. And I just think that, when people are so fixed on their ideology and that everything in it is just the best type of truth there is, that's the dangerous part, literally.
Yeah, I would agree with you there, and I think Muslims would do themselves a lot of favors if they drop this idea that. I'd go one further and say, look, if you did it more like the Christians do when they say, well, this is inspired by God, but we recognize it was written by people of the time, so they're not going to capture the exact word of God, but it's this kind of spirit of what he's saying. I think if you interpret a religious text that way, it gives you a lot more freedom to move, to get around some of this kind of bad stuff. But I think one of the big problems of Islam is this insistence that every word that's written in that book is the literal word of God. I mean, you're giving yourself so many problems to begin with, because then you've got to do this thing where you've got to come up with these really difficult reinterpretations sometimes, because you don't want to own a slave, you don't want to, you want to be a good person, and I just think this is what makes it difficult, I think, with Islam compared to other religions, because I think the two main ones is believing that it's literally the word of God, every single word, and number two is insisting that Muhammad was the greatest man to have ever lived for all time. I think if you could drop those two things, Islam would be able to get rid of a lot of the problems that it has.
My bad.
I was just gonna say, Drastic. Syed's been quiet for a while. I kind of want to listen to what his viewpoint is on this.
What did you say? I couldn't hear you.
I think he wants to know what Syed thinks about all this.
Yeah,
I mean, Syed,
Syed's another Muslim as well, right? So he might have an interesting perspective. So yeah, I'd love to hear what he has to say.
Yeah, Syed, feel free to make a comment. If you want to give your opinion on what we're talking about. Maybe okay, he doesn't say. Well, look, you carry on. Syed, jump in at any point. But yeah, sorry, Alioramus, you were going to say something.
I lost my train of thought, but the
thing is literalism, and
well, the thing is, I mean, it's like I suppose, the Christians have a different point of view where it's inspired by God. But if you look at the Jews, for example, they do take it literally, but they keep it personal. They don't, it's not like it's out there the way the Dawa people are doing it, if you know what I mean. It's just like it's a personal thing, and I think that's why I never say like I'm part of a religion, because I don't believe it's religion. I just think it's a connection between one person and God, and that's the way I view things. But unfortunately, that's not the way they view things. It's completely different.
I think if Christianity went through centuries long reformation to get where it is today, while Muhammad said before his death that no one can change or add anything to the religion or remove anything, and anyone who does that is a munafiq, a hypocrite. And therefore he made Islam reformation proof in a way. I think it is possible that Islam could go through a reformation if more people were to hold the views that Spores does, but I think it would still be pretty difficult, considering that you're not considered a Muslim anymore if you try to change anything from the religion.
Yeah, but I always look at it as that's a brand. They have a brand, and that's brand Islam, and I'm just not part of that. Even though I do read the Quran, but I just look at it completely different. I mean, you can't even compare what I believe in and what they actually believe in. And I know that I'm in a minority, probably even a minority of a minority. But
well, I was about to say, I don't mean this to sound insulting, but you almost sound the equivalent to what I would say a bit like a hippie Muslim. And when I say that, I mean kind of like that's the tradition. Excuse me. That was the tradition that you were brought up with, obviously, because you're from a Muslim family. So that is your kind of baseline for the spirituality in your life. But you don't seem like slavishly tied to it. It's more kind of, well, as you're saying, it's really personal for you, and you. What I don't know. I mean, well, let me ask you this. I mean, do you think that the Quran, every single word of that, is a literal word of God?
I couldn't even answer that question because at this point, as I said, I'm still at the point of sort of interpreting the Quran that is different from, and it's very difficult for us because all the translations have been done by, or the vast majority of translations that are out there have been done by people that come from that Sunni background. And a lot of what they've taken is they've taken kind of information from the hadiths and put them in the Quran. Whereas Sam Garens has done a pretty good job because he's rewritten the Quran, just taking the Quran alone as its own merit. And that's why, where you've interpreted things like sex slave, we haven't. So we've looked at that and seen something completely different. And again, it's so different in the sense, like, for example, the fasting. We don't look at it like, you don't eat and drink for 30 days because there's no example of that in the Quran. In the Quran, there was an example of when Mary gave birth to Jesus, and God told her that she shouldn't talk to anyone for a day. We look at that as the fast. So if you're doing Ramadan, and also like the Ramadan where they go with the moon and everything, we look at it differently. It says Ramadan in the Quran, but we looked at the ancient calendar. That Ramadan was actually September. September, it was known as the month of Ramadan. So it was in that old calendar, September is Ramadan. So, you got October, Ramadan, then November. So we look at, okay, that's the time to do the fasting. There's no 30 days. It says a number of days. So we're looking at it, and we're still in a very kind of, we're taking our first steps, if you know what I mean. Because it was nothing out there like that for the last.
Okay, but all right. I'm going to push that question a bit harder though, because I don't feel like you seem to have dodged it a little bit. With due respect, do you actually think that every word in the Quran is the literal word of God? Is that a yes or a no?
Again, I can't even say. I can't answer that, and the reason being, as I said, I haven't fully understood the Quran yet. I'm still in that process, so it's like a transitioning process, you could still say.
Sure, but do you think there's something that you're going to read in the Quran which will make you decide that it's not the literal word of God? Do you think that you could come to that position?
Well, do I think that it could have been changed in certain places? Yeah, I do believe that it could have been changed.
Okay, all right, no, that's fair enough. So you're open to the possibility. You're open.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. No, all right. Well, that's fair enough. But here's another question, and I see Perfect Darwa's back in the chat, and I remember I asked him about this when we talked. Why is it that the reinterpretations always have to be for the bits that are, violent or about slavery, beating wives, stuff like that? Why are they always the bits that need to be reinterpreted, whereas anything that's kind of neutral or
like I've just given you an example of the fasting that's been redone as well. Even the salat, that's been reinterpreted as well. So it's not just that. We're looking at the whole thing, not just looking at certain parts of it that are uncomfortable to people and so forth. I mean,
all right, fair enough. No, that's fair enough. No, you're right. You did give that as an example. So okay, fair point. Yeah, sorry. I feel like I'm dominating this conversation. Does anyone else want to jump in? Jinni, Syed, Nik, Alioramus?
I honestly don't have that much to add.
Okay.
I would like to ask a question. Would you, for Spores, would you consider yourself more of a Muslim agnostic in a way, for lack of a better description of that term?
I wouldn't. I would look. I don't know what it is, and maybe I'm just born that way. But I do believe that there is a God, or there is some supreme power, or I'm not saying like it's a bearded man in the skies. That's not the interpretation I have. But maybe some energy that's out there. So that is something that I've always been born with. I've never kind of grown up calling myself a Muslim because I've looked at other religions. At one point, if people ask me, I'd say, I follow the Buddhist philosophy. But yeah, so when it comes to God, it's just something that's just inbuilt, I suppose, that it's difficult for me to say, no, there isn't a God.
Okay,
Yeah,
can I
because,
ask you something?
Yeah, go ahead.
I have a question for Spores.
Yeah.
Also, if I'm not mistaken, people. I'm well aware that there are people who only follow the Quran and they don't follow the Hadiths. But as far as I know, at least Salafis or those who are literalists consider those who follow the Quran only and reject the Hadith to be heretics. What is your view on that?
Yeah, I don't really give a shit what they think, to be honest.
Be
As I said, I'm not. It's like water off a duck's back. They can say what they want. The only thing I don't like is just the way they are conducting themselves, and it's not just bad for people like me. I think it's bad for society, and it's bad for our country as well.
I have to agree there. Good points you were making. Personally, I think the Hadiths are more problematic than the Quran, honestly. Although the Quran has, some verses, that are questionable, but I think the Hadiths have more of that.
Gentlemen, I've just seen the time. We've been going over 2 hours. It's flown by. I had no idea. I was gonna. This is just a question for people in the chat. Would you want me to do any more kind of live streams like this where we can just kind of have general conversations? Because I've really enjoyed it, and if there's enough of an audience, I mean, I'm quite happy to do another one like this. So, I mean, people in the chat, if you, I don't know, give me a thumbs up or something if you would like to, have another one of these maybe next week or in a couple of weeks' time. And obviously, everyone's welcome to come back. I think I am going to wrap things up now. So unless anybody has got a burning issue they want to raise before I bring this to an end. Nik, Jinni, Alioramus, Spores, Syed.
Just wanted to pitch my the Gin and Tonic show. Because this live stream was going on today, I actually am premiering our last pre-recorded video tomorrow. But all you guys on the show, if you guys want to come onto the Gin and Tonic show when we start doing our live chats again, you're more than welcome to, and I'll put the link to Gin and Tonic on.
Oh yeah, and by the way, obviously, I mean, if I do another one of these streams, I'll make sure it doesn't clash with Gin and Tonic kind of usual time. Maybe doing it on a Friday or something. I don't know, but a few people in the chat have said they'd like another one. So, Jinni, any last words before we wrap up?
I thought that this was a wonderful little idea you had. And I mean, sure, not everyone here is an ex-Muslim. For example, I'm not an ex-Muslim. But, it's still interesting to see a lot of... I was actually pleasantly surprised with all of these Muslims that actually decided to join the chat. It shows that even if most of these Muslims here aren't kind of like traditionalist Muslims, it still shows that you are not that extreme that you're turning off all Muslims.
Yeah. Well,
it's a good sign.
Well, I don't think I'm extreme at all. Although, I mean, I've been accused of all sorts of things in my comment sections. But I mean, I do want dialogue with Muslims, whether they are orthodox or unorthodox, whether they're Sunni, Shias, Ahmadis, whatever. I mean, this is part of the thing, is to have conversations and see if we can come to understanding on stuff like this. So, yeah, I mean, it's. I'm hoping there will be some more ex-Muslims, because that was the original idea, obviously, to have it as a platform for ex-Muslims to tell their stories. So maybe we'll get some more of that next time. But yeah, I mean, Muslims are always welcome to come in and have a chat, you know, as long as you're not going to try and sabotage the the live stream. Which, but no, I think it's been really nice tonight.
Yeah,
Alioramus?
let's have as much fun in hell as we do getting there.
Yeah. Alioramus, thank you for telling your story, particularly, as I say, you are the only ex-Muslim on here, and it was really interesting listening to what you had to say. So thank you so much for that.
Thank you for giving me the time.
Yeah, and if we do another one like this, then you are more than welcome to come back on, because it was, yeah, a really good time talking to you. Spores, same for you as well. It's been great having you here, and thank you for kind of giving us your view on things. If you ever want to come back, if we do another one, then yeah, please do.
Thanks for having me, and maybe I'll go back and look at all the kind of different interpretations we've done and have a conversation about that.
Yeah, we could do. Syed, I know you've been very quiet, but I appreciate you for coming on. And you know, if you want to come on maybe next time and you can chat a bit more about your views on it, then you'll be more than welcome. I know it's difficult when we've got a big panel and you've got people like me who won't shut the fuck up. But yeah, thank you for joining in. Is there anything else you want to say before we wrap up?
Good show. That's what I had to say.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, I think Syed might have fallen asleep. I'm not sure, but yeah. Okay. Well, look, thank you, everyone. This was, I don't know what to call this live stream now. It was sort of for ex-Muslims, but it was also supposed to be celebrating 1,000 subscribers, but I haven't quite made it. So everyone in the chat, go tell everybody you know to subscribe to the channel, please. That would be helpful.
I got a title idea, Drastic.
Yeah, go ahead.
The Hideaway to Hell.
I'll think about it. Yeah, anyway, okay, I'll bring it to a close. Thank you to everyone in the chat who've been making comments. I really appreciate it. And yeah, maybe do another one of these before the end of the month. And yeah, anyone else who wants to come on is welcome. Thanks to all my guests, and I'm going to end the broadcast right now.
Cheers, guys.